Most, if not all manufacturers don't only focus on one model. These models all come with varying levels of public perception and how much actually people like them. Today, I'm going to be looking through most large and reputable manufacturers to see which of their models are the best. There are two main rules for this list though. The first is that there will be no family coasters. I'm going to be using this list to rank just the thrilling coasters. Number two is that there has to be at least two or more of that style of coaster. This applies to companies like Aero, which have only built one of a certain type of coaster, in this case, like the 4D coaster. If this rule wasn't in place, Aero's best model would be the 4D coaster since their only installation was a huge hit. Also, please don't go in the comments asking for GCI or CCI or most wooden coaster manufacturers. These also only focus on one ride style and don't work for this list. Let's begin. We'll start off today's list with the manufacturer I use in the example, Aerodynamics. I'm going to be looking at a few of their models, particularly the Hyper, Corkscrew, Loop Corkscrew, Custom Looper, Shuttle Loop, Hybrid, and Suspended coasters. So, quite the portfolio. I immediately want to eliminate the Corkscrew, Loop Corkscrew, Shuttle Loop, and Hybrid coasters. These range from mediocre to solid, but are far from the company's best. In my opinion, their best model overall is a suspended coaster. The reason for this is that there's no bad one out there. These range from either mild but scenic, like Iron Dragon, or fast and intense, like Vortex. The sad part about this model is that the two best coasters are both already defunct. These are Eagle's Fortress at Everland and Big Bad Wolf at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. These manage to be scenic and intense, which is just the perfect mix. Even without these though, the model is still very solid. Unlike the Hypercoaster, which is unexpectedly beat out, most Aero Hypers are actually pretty bad. They only seemed like a good contender because of Magnum, which really carried them. Next, let's talk about B&M. Only two of their coasters are geared for a younger audience, so this gives us a lot of choices. Wings, dives, inverts, these are all great, but there's zero chance that I'm picking anything other than their Hyper model. These include the 14 Hypers and 3 Gigas. All of these out there are seen as elite coasters around the world, and there really isn't a bad one out there at all. If I weren't to choose the Hyper, I'd probably go with the invert. There are really no bad inverts out there either, it's just that the best inverts don't really stack up against the best Hypers. Simple choice, quick and easy. Now, let's have Gerstlauer. There are only really two models we can choose from. These are of course the Eurofighter or the Infinity, and I'm choosing the Infinity. This is because of how the Infinity coaster layouts always seem to be so creative and original, while most Eurofighters are unfortunately clones. The other main factor that makes me put this above the Eurofighter is the fact that they have Fury. Not that Fury, I'm talking about Fury in Belgium. This is the infamous voting coaster, where the riders decide if they go forwards or backwards. It's just such a cool and creative idea and makes me hopeful for the future of this model and to see if we actually ever get anything of that caliber here in North America. Next up, we have Intamin. This'll take a while. Intamin is known to have a ton of different models under their name, and deciding the best is extremely difficult. They have so many quality models, but the three I want to focus on are the Accelerators, Mega Coasters, and the LSM Launch Coasters. There are multiple pros and cons to each of these. The Accelerators have crazy launches, but are over way too quickly. The Hypers are long rides with many forces, but have no launches, which in my opinion are Intamin's specialty. To me, the Blitz Coaster is the perfect middle ground. They all have solid launches and can be quite long. They aren't extremely elite in any of the two categories, but the mix of the two are perfect. To me, Intamin should focus more on marketing these Blitz coasters, because in theory, they really do work at any park. In a small park, they can be tight and compact or circle over footpaths while still providing lots of airtime and positive Gs. Think of something like Steel Dolphin. For large parks, these also work very well too, since they can fill a gap of an intense launch coaster while still having good capacity with the multiple trains and long ride times. Think of something like Maverick or Velocicoaster for this. These reasons also make the Blitz Coaster my favorite coaster model out there from any manufacturer. They really are perfect at any park. Next up, we got Mack Rides. There are three main models that I want to choose from. These are the Launch Coaster, the Hyper Coaster, and the Extreme Spinner. This may be kinda cheap, but I think I'll go with the Extreme Spinner for this one. The reason why I say this is kinda cheap is because there are only two of them out there. These are Ride to Happiness and Time Traveler. These two rides definitely justify the top placement of this model though. Time Traveler got it started in 2018, breaking immense ground and giving spinning coasters a new perspective in the community. Spinners had all been seen as family coasters up until then, so this really changed things. Time Traveler is also just a great ride in general. The inversions are fun and floaty, and the ride feels out of control, but Ride to Happiness really stepped up the intensity. The inversions are intense and somehow also give better hang time. The spinning is a lot faster, and the launches are actually okay. The ride also has some very surprising airtime moments, and is overall just a more chaotic experience. While these are both relatively new, I think these rides are definitely winners. Now let's go to the most difficult one on this list, Maurer. They don't really have any bad models, but none of their models are significantly good. I think their best one is probably the launched X-Car coaster, simply for the fact that they're pretty intense and apparently have good launches. The reason why most of the people haven't heard of these launch coasters is that A, there are none in the US, and B, they really aren't just that many out there in the world in general. These use their comfortable X-Car trains, so they actually do look like good rides, but we've yet to see that up here in North America. Here's another manufacturer that's pretty limited in terms of models. This is Mack Rides. They exclusively make launch coasters, so finding notable differences is very difficult. To me, their best model is probably their Shuttle LIM coaster. This is not in production anymore, but the 3 built in North America were amazing in their own ways, despite being notable headaches to their parks. Mr. Freeze at 2 of the 6 Flags parks is one of the most aggressive and intense coasters out there and has those amazing LIM boosters on the spike. This does spend an extremely long time being closed due to maintenance, however, but it isn't too bad. The other, and unfortunately defunct one, is Batman and Robin the Chiller at Six Flags Great Adventure. This was arguably even more intense than Mr. Freeze and had 2 dueling tracks. These launches unfortunately caused frequent power outages for the area of the park, and Great Adventure had to pull the plug on it in 2007. Still a beloved and missed coaster to this day, however. The next manufacturer is RMC, who unsurprisingly has very few models, only 3 to be exact, and the clear winner is obviously the iBox Hybrid. This is the winner for 2 reasons. 1, all of the hybrids out there are some of the best coasters ever and are loved by nearly everyone who rides them. These coasters are full of negative G moments and the awesome inversions filled with hang time and whip. The other, and arguably more notable reason, is just because the hybrid itself is an engineering marvel. RMC doesn't even use their own structure on nearly all their hybrids, and they always exceed the original coaster's height, adding even more of a thrill. The way that these coasters are made is just jaw-dropping, and is really what makes me take this over the other 2 models. Let's now head on to S&S, a company who again makes nearly exclusively launch coasters, but do have a bit of variety. All of their models aside from their wooden coasters are very solid, but there's no question that their best model is the 4D coaster. There are only 2 of these currently operating, and both are contenders for the best coaster in the world. It's a shame that these are both in Asia and are so far away. I really wish that there was more of these out in the world as well, but their high maintenance and a very high cost prevents them from being created too often. These coasters are notorious for being extremely intense and being super out of control and disorienting. They're probably some of the most extreme rides out there. Hopefully I get to ride one someday. Here's another easy one, Schwarzkopf. This defunct manufacturer has a few models under their belt, but there's no better one than their custom looper. In terms of forces, these aren't too different from their clone models, but the main thing that these have going for them is the length. It's no surprise that nearly all of Schwarzkopf's clonable models are very short in length. These usually leave you wanting more in terms of a full package layout, but these loopers really do fix what the clones don't do. The ones in North America consist of Super Duper Looper, Revolution, Mindbender, and Shockwave. I don't know of anyone who actually dislikes these rides at all, and it just shows how good these custom loopers really are. And for the final manufacturer, we have one of the most simultaneously loved and hated ones out there. This is Vekoma. Their stuff from before 2005 is all pretty abysmal, so we'll be looking at their new stuff. Most of their new models are fairly similar to one another, but the best one looks to be their Shockwave model. There are currently 2 operating out there. These seem to be the best of every other Vekoma model. The launches, the top hats, the inversions, and all of that floater and ejector airtime. These coasters are also very long. Like, 4,000 feet on a launch coaster is really long. Now these aren't perfect, especially towards the end where the pacing slows down, but these are very solid coasters for larger parks. So yeah, that's it. I don't really have any more manufacturers to speak about, and I don't feel like doing the outro. Thanks for watching.